everything you need to know about products and services that can improve your life. This is Experts on Call on CL 650.
I'm going to work in tall buildings.
All right, welcome back to StrataLife on CL 650. Key Pacific Property Management is here, and Drew Grout is representing them from the Director of Strata Services. Jennifer Neville was on earlier, lawyer at Hammerberg Lawyers, and Eric Lauritsen, Senior Project Manager, Applied Coatings and Restoration, talking just a moment ago about underground parkades or parkades in general. Now, Drew, this section's for you. Now, what are the P's again? We talk about this.
4 P's.
The 4 P's. People?
People, parking, pools, and pets.
Right. So we're going to get into some of these, I'm sure, with our questions, our mailbag. The first one says, I recently requested a review and keep copies of our Strata Council's correspondence with our Strata manager over an insurance issue. Our Strata management company wants to charge me $100 an hour to view the records and 25 cents for copies. This seems improper to me. Is this a standard charge?
Yes and no. It would be improper for the Strata to charge the owner to view the documents under Section 36.
Yes.
Good to have Jennifer.
Yes,
you can
36.
kick me if I misspeak. The Strata Property Act provides for an owner to view documents upon request. And there are charges that can be applied, and the copy charge is a valid charge. If you come and look at documents and you want a copy of this one, you can pay 25 cents a copy for that.
Well, I can understand the copies. I mean, there has to be a cost for that. But $100 an hour to view records, that seems a bit...
So the Act basically says you cannot charge somebody for the viewing action. Now, what you have is management contracts between the management company and the Strata Corporation, whereby the Strata Corporation may, under contract, be able to charge the Strata for the extra time involved. So if somebody wants to view a number of documents, the Strata Management Company has to go through a process of reviewing the documents themselves and redacting anything that is private, that shouldn't be for the eyes of anybody. That can take some time.
So those would be kind of in-camera meetings, sort of?
No, this would be something that the property management company would do on their own. Okay. They redact it. They prepare the package for a person to review, and then they come into the office and be parked someplace to review the documents. So
there's a cost to your company, for example, to do that?
Preparing this stuff, sometimes supervising the person because you don't want people wandering around, whatever. Those costs can be charged back to the Strata Corporation. So it's an expense as a Strata Corporation, but they can't charge that back to the owner. Mm-hmm. If when viewing, the person wants copies, then we charge them 25 cents a copy. So the dollars seem right, but the $100 charge to the owner is wrong, in my opinion.
The next question says, a few years ago, our Strata Council created a rule prohibiting residents from backing into parking spaces. I and several other owners think this is ridiculous and would quickly vote to rule it down, but it's never been discussed at our AGM. Can the council do that?
Well, that's an interesting question.
I don't understand why you would want that, but...
Well, for me, it's interesting in that she's talking about, he was talking about a few years ago. Mm-hmm. So the Strata councils can create rules to administer common property, and bylaws are used to administer common property and what's going on in strata lots. So whenever a Strata council enacts a rule, they're required to bring that before the owners at the next general meeting to be ratified. Mm-hmm. Meaning the owners will say, yeah, we like that rule, we're going to keep it, or no, we don't like that rule and we're not going to ratify it. The rule dies. So a rule from a few years ago should have gone before a general meeting.
So that's where you would want to get the correspondence from the previous meeting, whatever that was several years ago, to find out if it actually was ratified, right?
Yeah. I personally, I would first be looking into when was the rule brought up, and yes, was it ratified? Mm-hmm. If it wasn't ratified, then technically it'd be an invalid rule. Mm-hmm. Now, assuming it's a valid rule and that sort of thing, then owners can change things, and by petitioning the council to deal with a matter at a special general meeting with a special resolution to deal with the matter for the Strata Corporation. And there's a process outlined in the Act that they would follow to do that. Or they can simply just communicate with the council and bring it to their attention, maybe they'll review the matter themselves and decide that they haven't followed the proper process.
Why would have you ever heard of back-in only rule in a parkade?
Yes.
Why? Why was
not
that?
so much in a parkade, the townhomes where you have people with large trucks and
Tires?
their hitches are sticking out into the roadway.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can put your vehicle further in when you're backing it in than when you're going front ways in. Mm-hmm. So there are places where that's necessary. There are some places you cannot back in because when they start the car, the door to the Strata is right over there, and you don't want the fumes going in the window.
Absolutely, yeah, that makes sense. The next one says, we recently bought a condo and hired a contractor to paint, change lighting, and new flooring in the bedrooms before we moved in. We received a letter from the council saying a recent addition to the Strata rules prohibit changing flooring without permission. We read the bylaws when we purchased, and there's no discussion of renovations or permission. They're insisting remove the hardwood flooring and cover it with carpet. Do we need to comply?
Yeah, it kind of relates to what Jennifer was talking about earlier, and they really need to look to the bylaws. If the bylaws don't specify the need to get approval or specifically floors, then there's the question would be, can you really what bylaw are you enforcing? If there is a bylaw, and there is usually a bylaw for making some changes, and floors are particularly particular concern in many stratas. If there is a bylaw, you have to follow it, and if you don't get the permission before you do the work, you could be required to remove it.
So is this just a simple case of saying to the council, these are going to be your new neighbors? Can you provide that to me in writing? What the rules are, and if they can't provide it, then
rules are typically provided to all new owners.
They've said that we read the bylaws.
And there was nothing.
And there was nothing.
Yeah. So if there's nothing in the bylaws speaking to renovations and requiring pre-approval, then
it should be fine.
I'd challenge that.
Okay.
Well, what's interesting, too, I think they're relying on a rule to enforce
as opposed to a bylaw.
And the rules can't affect how a person uses their strata lot.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. The next one says we received a notice of an SGM, which is a special general meeting, right?
Yeah.
And to be held next month to vote on several bylaws, including on limiting the number of pets in a unit to 2. We currently have no bylaws restricting pets. Does this mean owners that currently have 3 pets will be forced to get rid of one, or are current pets grandfathered? The council also instructed owners not to bring any pets until after the vote. Is this enforceable?
So right now they don't have a pet bylaw, so pets are allowed. Mm-hmm. If you happen to have 3 pets and tomorrow they pass the bylaw, then your 3 pets are permitted to stay. Is grandfather the right word to use?
Certainly
they're
the common
exempt from the
term
bylaw.
that people use.
Yeah. And the Act provides for that. Any pet that's living there at the time the bylaws pass is allowed to stay there until they leave or the pet moves to the happy hunting ground in the sky. The other part of it, asking people not to get pets before the meeting,
Yeah, well, if it's not a rule, it's not a rule, right?
If it's not a bylaw, it's not a bylaw. Yeah. So if somebody is thinking of getting...
there's a difference between rules and bylaws.
Yes.
So if it's not a bylaw yet, you can get your pets.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. Okay, the next one says our strata is over 30 years old and has large repairs and maintenance budget each year. We recently had a big section of fence fall down. It requires replacement. The council chose to hire a contractor immediately, even though the cost will eat up 40% of the repairs and maintenance budget for the year. How can the owners stop the repair because of the draining effect we have on this year's budget? So this is basically a numbers game. Right.
Yeah, and it also depends on how your budget's set up and what sort of expense you're talking about, because there are guidelines and how you can spend the money that's in the budget.
Okay, just quickly before we get into it. So if the fence falls down and this is an emergency repair and the fence needs to be replaced, does that need to go to a meeting in order for, say, Key Pacific to come in and or get the repair done?
The portion of the repair that would be deemed the emergency can be done quickly,
right,
without having to go to the owners for approval.
Right. So that's part of the budget that is put aside for ongoing maintenance.
No, yes. the ongoing maintenance part of it. Emergency is something that comes at you from the side.
Right. That's when you have
you may not have money budgeted for emergency.
That's when you have your SGM, right? Your special general meeting for something that is big, right?
Big if you're going to, like a capital expenditure. So let's say there was a security issue involved here that had to be dealt with right away. You can deal with that, but by and large, the fence needs to be reworked or replaced. That action, if it's not incorporated in somehow into the budget, would be a new expenditure, would have to go to the owners, get their approval.
So in this instance, somebody's obviously saying, okay, this fence repair is going to eat up 40% of their maintenance budget that they've allocated for the year. So who decides that that's going to get spent?
Well, the council administers the budget, but they have, like I said, guidelines. If the budget, and many stratas will have a large repair and maintenance budget that gives them some flexibility to do with all sorts of repairs and maintenance without specifying something, because a lot of these things you can't plan on the pipe leak,
and it needs to be done right now,
or the little fence that's fallen over,
right?
But they have those things happening routinely, so you build that into your repair and maintenance. When you're talking about something that seems to be as big as this, it's a capital expenditure, not so much an emergency. There's time to deal with it, then time to decide how we're going to fund it. In other matters, it may be the sort of thing that is contemplated in their repair and maintenance at the time they pass the budget, in which case they can spend the money for that, regardless of the fact that it's going to take 40%. It's hopefully contemplated that it's going to take a large part of the budget. But barring that, the owners should be approving that sort of expenditure at a general meeting.
All right, here's a quick one. I think we're going to get you involved in this one.
You didn't kick me.
No. I was approached in our Parkade council president informing me that the council is fining me for improper window coverings. He also informed me that a $50 a week fine would be retroactive for 6 weeks since we've had our new blinds. The conversation was the first time I've heard anything about the bylaw fine. Should they have warned me before imposing fines? So I guess you can't just go up to somebody and say, hey, by the way, you owe us for 6 weeks past fine. So when do you get notified, and when does the clock start ticking?
Well, yeah, Section 135 of the Strata Property Act requires a strata corporation to give notice of a complaint and an opportunity for an owner to respond before you can fine them. So in this case, it looks like the Strata Council hasn't complied with that section of the Act.
That's right. So if
you have to let somebody remedy the situation.
That's right. You have to give them. You have to notify them of what the alleged violation is. Give them time to respond to it, or otherwise deal with it. If you hear nothing back or their explanation isn't valid, then the Strata Corporation will consider the matter based on that information. They may impose a fine, but to go back and impose previous fines without, and I did it once wrong, all the other times are your fault, you didn't tell me, so they can't really go back and impose those retroactively.
It sounds like someone is coming down heavily on somebody, just throwing their weight around.
Or they just don't understand the process.
All right.
And there is a process, and you don't follow it, then you're setting yourself up for failure.
That's the voice of Drew Grout, Director of Strata Services at Key Pacific Property Management. We just heard from Jennifer Neville, lawyer at Hammerberg Lawyers, and Eric Lordson is with us as well, Senior Project Manager of Applied Coatings and Restoration. When we come back, we're going to go around the table one more time and pick up on any last thoughts. You're listening to StrataLife on CL 650.
This is Experts on Call on CL 650.